If you can answer that question, how is my client feeling during right now at this point? And how do I want them to feel at this point? How are they potentially feeling at this point? And do I need to pivot a little bit? And that's where you can really get creative and thinking, okay, what do I want? What do I want them to want? What do they want? What do they need? And how can I influence those things? And that's where the design phase comes into play. Like to your point, it could be very fun.
Step one of the 5 Ds of systemization is design. And so basically what we're saying here is we need to design what the system is. We can't just be jumping into something by the seat of our pants. This is like, it's almost like an art project, and that's why the term design is really apt here. It's like you're creating something that needs to really have some elegance, have some beauty, have some logic to it. It has to flow, it has to work. And so you really need to kind of go into brainstorming mode. You need to clear off, 4 hours in your calendar. You got to wipe off everything in your whiteboard or get some big Post-its, turn on some good music, order in some Uber Eats and do some planning, man. And this is what the design phase is all about. It's one of my favorites because it really taps into my creativity. But it's be creative and really design something from scratch. Probably the better term from instead of an art project, it's more like you're an architect, right? And you're architecting, this structure, this building. And it's okay, well, we would need this sort of foundation and this sort of, here's where the windows would be. And this is what the entrance is. And this is what the person's going to see when they walk into the building. Just like you're thinking, okay, well, what's the customer experience going to be like? What are they going to see when they interact with my people or interact with my business? So there's a few other things I want to say about design, but I want to kick it to you because you've done a really good job of this. What are your thoughts on this first G of systemization?
The first one is the question is always in mind is, what do I want them to feel during this interaction? So how do I want them to feel during this interaction? How do I want a rep to feel during point A to point B to point C, and each interaction, how do I want them to feel, or how are they currently feeling, and how can I influence those feelings during the interaction? If I'm working in a sales capacity with a client, whether it's on a phone call or during a presentation, it's like at each step, each pivot, each transition, how do I want my client to feel during each exchange or during each pivot? And if you can answer that question, how is my client feeling during right now at this point? And how do I want them to feel at this point? How are they potentially feeling at this point? And do I need to pivot a little bit? And that's where you can really get creative and thinking, okay, what do I want? What do I want them to want? What do they want? What do they need? And how can I influence those things? And that's where the design phase comes into play. Like to your point, it could be very fun. Totally.
So write that down. What do I want my client to feel at this particular experience? Or if you're starting, an employee experience, you're recruiting somebody, what do I want my new hire to feel coming into this experience? So it's like, what are your, desired outcomes is another big question, right? So what are my desired outcomes from this system? I'm guessing if you run a sales team, on the other end of this line, one thing you do is you run a team meeting at some point, right? A weekly team meeting or a monthly team meeting or something, you run a team meeting. But have you ever sat down and just listed out what are all my desired outcomes from a team meeting? And have you ranked them, or at least the top 3 to 5? What are those exact outcomes that you're looking to actually solve? Obviously increase sales, or, get people on the phone to book more appointments, or maybe it's to give recognition, or maybe it's to strengthen culture, or maybe it's to inspire them, or maybe it's, to build teamwork and camaraderie. Maybe it's to reprimand them. Maybe it's like you can come up with any sort of complex list of a desired outcome, but then figure out what are your top 3? What am I really trying to create here? And then what we want to do is we want to work backwards and reverse engineer those desired outcomes. Like Mike said, how do I want my client to feel in this experience? So then we're going to reverse engineer that and say, well, if that's going to be the case, how could we best do that? And I really also do recommend at this point to be pretty willing to, there's no bad idea, right? This is really like brainstorming. and be willing to kind of design the ideal situation. And we can figure out how to implement just part of it and, kind of drip it out. I know change management is a big topic that business owners and business leaders need to always be thinking about. We can't change everything overnight, but really think about, okay, what would be the ideal scenario for this experience? You heard Mike talking about intake forms, and that if it's red, then they get this call. If it's yellow, then they get that call. If it's white, they get this. And everything is really well designed and thought out. So start with the end in mind, think about the ideal scenario, and start to put together those series of processes, policies, and technologies that would actually create the desired outcome.